greatest challenge is to making sure everybody gets a fair shake, that the four counties can come together, that they all think they're getting something in return, and to make sure that the water supply is there for them. They all have different challenges back home, but like I said, they all have the common goal of making sure they have water supply for their residents and for economic growth.
The best part of the authority is its underlying concept. You know, the idea of we're going to get together, plan this out on a regional basis, look for opportunities and economies of scale where we can do things more efficiently, more effectively, and hopefully reduce the impacts on the surrounding environment, do things in a more sustainable way.
The most challenging thing always is when you have a multi-government agency trying to coordinate everybody's needs and wants and dealing with their local constituents. All four of these governments and the customers have their own issues with their own constituents. They have to support their constituents. So bringing them all together has been the challenge for years, and fortunately we've been successful over every obstacle that has come forth with the authority. People have seen the value of working regionally on water supply.
Early in my tenure as executive director, that water resources, particularly in the southern part of our water management district, were strained. Groundwater resources were limited, surface water was a limited resource, and the idea of a regional approach to water supply development seemed to make a lot of sense.
One night after a Swiftmud board meeting, Bruce Sampson and we were discussing things in the south part of the district, and the fact that all the activities had been that we had financed from the district took place up in the northern part of the district, and down in the southern part of our Sarasota and Manatee counties, we were feeling that maybe we were a little left out on that. So maybe we ought to concentrate some kind of a project down there. And there was some tensions building up down here at the time, because during the water shortage, there were some inequities down here about who had water and who didn't have water. And so Bruce and I got to thinking, the Tampa Bay Authority seemed to work very well up there. They had a more contentious problem than we had down here, I believe, in Tampa, but they were able to sort of not maybe solve it all, but they were able to calm it down and work with the people around Hillsborough County, Tampa, and said, why don't we think about something like that down in South District? And so that was the seeds that we started thinking about, and the purposes at that time was to primarily build interconnects so that we could share our water at times that we need it. And so that was the first undertakings we had. And we were quite successful with getting a lot of these interconnects.
Well, before they acquired the water plant, it was just strictly planning, and it was planning for interconnection of water supplies, which is always a good idea. No one should have only one source of water. And so it was always under the guise of emergency interconnections, so that you would always have someone you could turn to. But of course, it doesn't make sense to build a pipe, which costs, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, and just use it in an emergency. First of all, it needs to be used all the time to stay functional. So really that idea morphed over time into having functional connections, and of course it paid off to Charlotte County really well when the hurricane hit in 2004 and knocked the water plant out. Charlotte County was supplied with water from Sarasota County.
They saw an opportunity when general development their water supply facility on the Peace River was in financial trouble and saw an opportunity to possibly make that a regional water supply system, all surface water at the time, but clearly an opportunity for the district to come in and hopefully facilitate within communities within Southwest Florida to look at that as a regional source for existing and future growth of that area.
That facility, even though it was in DeSoto County, was providing water down to Northport and down south in Charlotte County. So Charlotte County and felt that they should own that facility if anybody should buy it. DeSoto County says, there's no way that's going to happen. This is in our county. You know, this is our water.
We'd look at this interconnect, we talk about this, we talk about that. But I guess the catalyst that threw all of this up on top of the table was when General Development Corporation was declaring bankruptcy. They were being sued from all over the place, and they were heading for the bankruptcy court, and that was going to throw that whole big utility conglomerate up for grabs. And everybody in this area, including private interests, were looking at how do we pick that off. It's a $100 million utility. We didn't want to lose the tax revenue off that water plant. So we're trying to figure out what are we going to do to salvage this thing. Charlotte was looking to grab everything. You know, it was very difficult to take the plant and not take the lines because of the severance run the cost up over here. And it just became very, very complicated very quickly.
The lawsuit that we got into was an uncertain time. And there was a sense of power grabbing and, we paid the money, why don't we have the ownership?
We thought maybe it would be good to make that part of the authority and to scout water off the Peace River as one of the interconnects and one of the objects of the authority. So we started negotiating with General Development on that water plant. And there were some tensions there. Primarily, I think, was with Charlotte County, and they weren't too eager for it.
You have to understand that the general development water infrastructure was mainly to promote Charlotte County's water because they didn't have the ability to have a water supply like others. Now, the plant did set in very minorly, but just across the line in DeSoto County and very close to Sarasota County. So that when the general development issue came up, it was only logical that everybody said, well, we weren't thinking regionally then, so they wanted to have, and the regional aspect hadn't caught on as much, so they didn't know what an authority was going to do, and really nobody did. But it was only natural that they try to protect what they felt was going to be the future of their water resources. Northport as well, as a customer, ended up in the lawsuit and so forth, getting their own plant, and now they're actually very regional as a customer. So I think it's a matter of history, and that history is hard to forget as you go through the years.
I actually remember to this day, would have been about in 1989, sitting in a conference room in the Bradenton office of the Herald Tribune with Ed Chance and some Swift Mud people, and for the first time hearing somebody say, gosh, that GDC plant down south, maybe the Water Supply Authority should buy that.
You know, Tampa Bay Water was born out of a war, a water war, and it was a solution that was forced upon the region. I think, if you look at what Peace River was, we were born out of a solution. So we had the Water Management District come in and say, if you all will get together regionally, we'll fund a large percentage of the cost of this plant that you're all going to have to pay for. And so I think we were cajoled into forming and given reason and incentive to do so, not forced.
Charlie Black said he'd give us $1 million if to the Water Supply Authority if the Water Supply Authority would purchase it. It was a tough swallow, but they did it. That $1 million then triggered the next phase, which was to begin to talk to the governments about what kind of arrangement, water supply arrangements, each government would have. So the negotiations started, which took a long time.
We were proponents of buying it, and I would say we were sort of ignorant proponents because we thought we were getting more than we were getting. I think that we and a lot of those that favored doing it thought, well, we were getting the plant, and the plant processes the water, therefore we got the water. And that water isn't going to get stolen from us and go somewhere else. So there was a lot of that attitude. And I would say we shared some of that.
Naturally, I think in the beginning there was a lot of suspicion between communities and utility directors, and you know, this idea of regionalization was somewhat foreign to a lot of those folks down there. But as we began at the Water Management District to better understand the relationship between pumpage and environmental impact and impact to Charlotte Harbor, this idea of coming together, and rather than everyone compete for a limited resource, rather than have everybody stick their straw in the river and try to stick their straw in the ground, that collectively coming together, both from a economical and a environmental perspective, really made a lot of sense.
There were times when I've had commissioners or people just throw the books down and say, I can't do this anymore. Basically, 50 years out now, we're planned. And still planning, still in the state of planning.
Planning is critical. It takes 10 years to create water infrastructure, so you have to be planning 10 years ahead. Even though we're happy today with our supply, 10 years from now, we know we're going to grow, the region's going to grow, and we're going to need additional water. So we have to be ready for that growth.
I guess the best part is that there's a vision there, and that they are always looking forward and planning for the future, and that they've ended up being able to always, even in the drought, they was always able to provide the water that needed to be provided for people.
There was consternation, if I can say it as one thing. The job was to pull together 4 counties, all agree on both the purchase of the land and everything at the General Development Company. That's the political side of it, was trying to, or maybe educational side, to have these people come together. I want people to be comfortable when we'd have these meetings. I'll tell you, they were rockin' bad and tough.
Oh, it was incredibly difficult. I mean, from the outset, when the Water Authority talked about buying that plant, there was resistance, pretty fierce resistance in Charlotte County.
It's not always easy. As I like to say, sometimes we cuss and discuss the issues, and then we figure it out what's best for our region, and we move forward with it. And we've been able to do that most recently, of course, with the 91 rebuild, which is the original plant that was purchased by, I guess it was purchased by Charlotte County originally, and of course it's old and it needed to be rebuilt.
And then the big one that I think that happened in the Peace River Valley was the realization and appreciation for the importance of surface water, the use of surface water.
When we were looking at the Peace River option and assessing it, many of my colleagues in Charlotte were opposed. They were very concerned, particularly on the environmental side. And I think that's another of the undervalued component, that it's an environmentally safe, friendly, progressive project. So, but yeah, no, it's been very difficult and continues to be difficult to this day.
That river flows every day, and
Sometimes it gets low, historically in the spring of the year, but a lot of the times the stream flow, even at the gauge in Arcadia, will be over 2 billion gallons a day. And that's upstream from a bunch of creeks before you get to the water treatment plant. So we kind of had to get past the idea, well, you know, we shouldn't take it out of the river because we need it, whether we're Ardee County or DeSoto County or Charlotte County or the estuary or whoever we are. And really, we weren't using it much, our inland counties. And a guy named Felton Garner actually had a permit to pump out of the river years ago. And he would tell you, he said, look, said when I can pump out of the river according to my permit, I don't need water. You know, when the river gets low is when I need water and I can't pump out of the river. So we weren't using it. You know, the people that want to protect the estuary, all of us really, we understand we can't take too much. But when you're talking about billions of gallons a day of stream flow, you know, a 10% limit is what the used to be, and we've never come close to it, but you really are not hurting the estuary. And so we had to work through that. And once the public became, I think, comfortable with the idea that we weren't going to hurt the environment, that we weren't going to hurt upstream users, they began to accept the idea of harvesting more water from the river.
I think that expansion when we built the reservoir, you know, I mean, it took a long time, maybe a couple of years. I don't remember exactly, but a couple of years just to get through all the details, the contract, you know, to sign everybody on board with it, you know. And then the project took ever how long, you know, a couple of years, and I think that was one of the biggest things that happened there, you know, and it was I think a very good thing.
I think the hardest thing is probably working toward a common solution. And what I like is that the board formulates that, and it changes over time, which is okay, as it doesn't change radically. Back when we were dealing with water shortages and drought, we were focused on building water supply, the 6 billion gallon a day reservoir to increase our ability to hold water during, you know, taken from the wet season for the dry season. And as we move forward now, the water supply needs are taken care of in the near future. And what we're looking at is incremental supplies. So we're focusing now more, the board is, on distribution. The idea of interconnecting more and more communities to be able to use what we call a conjunctive use, which is when surface water is available, like from Manatee's reservoir and from our reservoir, that we can rest the supplies that are used from groundwater.
Okay, GGU had a capacity of 12 million gallons a day when we purchased the facility. Over the past 3 decades, we've increased that, quadrupled it to over 50 million gallons a day capacity. Along with that treatment capacity, we've increased the water storage in the reservoir from 500 million gallons. We now have 6.5 billion gallons of reservoir storage. We have well over a year of storage right now as we speak today.
The biggest problem politically was the price of water. Manatee County had their price of water, Charlotte County had their price. And the way I set that agreement up, and remember we had to completely revise all of the political arrangements down there when we bought that facility. You had to have 2 basin boards, the district governing board involved, 4 counties, and I think Sarasota was involved as well as Northport in terms of the agreements. It was like 7 or 11, I can't remember how many governments we had to negotiate one contract with them, one agreement with all of them. And then they had sub-agreements between themselves, but I didn't worry about that. I was more worried about the main contract. So in that discussion, everybody's concerned about the price of water. So what I did, and this was a problem for Pat once he eventually had to face it, and it was the biggest thing he had to face when he built the project that we designed. It was the fact that my concept was that I sold to them and they were able to bite into was if we take a pipeline from this water supply source and it cost us $2 million to get it to you, then that $2 million is going to be in your rates, not in everybody else's rates. So everybody then contemplated having a water supply, not paying the same amount each.
And the Peace River is Charlotte County's old, inexpensive supply. and the newer, even the new expansions coming on are more expensive than that older capacity is. And so, you know, this proposal to go, and it's in the contract, to go to the common rate, it builds into the process a reason for Charlotte County to object to every new expansion. If every new expansion is going to dilute our old inexpensive supply and increase our rates to our residents when they're not getting new capacity out of it, that's a reason for us to object. There is no benefit to my citizens and the costs go up, therefore my obligation is to say no.
I wish that while we were rewriting the 2005 contract, Master Water Supply contract, I wish that we were able to reach more agreement and unity on a common price going forward per 1,000 gallons. Once that's done, it takes away a lot of the competing interest and allows the parties to move together more together than worried about how much a change or something new will affect their rate. Because something new might affect Charlotte's rate, but it won't affect Sarasota's rate. So you might have Sarasota arguing against a positive change because it would affect their rate, yet they feel they have no benefit. With a common rate, everybody's looking for what's best for the system going forward.
We're still working and we're still going, and I don't think there's nothing that I look back on that I think we made a mistake on that I'd like to change. I think everything's where it needs to be and it's happened like it's supposed to happen.
We've come from a place where it was maybe more adversarial, and now I think we're understanding that being regional and being congenial and working together in a collaborative way is the most important thing. So, you know, at this point I think we're still always going to be in a learning process, and at the end of the day I think people are aware of the fact that nothing happens with one vote, that everybody has to get together and make decisions that make sense. And I think for the most part, you know, for 25 years, we're finally just out of our infancy. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think we're in a very good place.
We should be looking back at our history with a frank, unvarnished assessment of where we've been and use that as a basis to learn where we might go from here, and can the authority really achieve its potential of what it can be, with an eye towards cooperation and innovation. I mean, there's just really extraordinary opportunities. Let's take them.
When I look into the future, I'm going probably 20 years or more, because I think for 20 years we have some incremental water supply needs, some interconnectivity needs, but it's really, I hope, pretty smooth sailing for the authority and for the members. I think the next challenge is going to be water quality, and I think that's going to be across the state. And it'll be interesting to see how we at the authority can address those issues. So, and by that I mean, I think there'll be new water quality standards potentially by the EPA or by the state. And I think there's also going to be more utilization of stormwater as a water support going source in the future. And I don't know exactly how that's going to look, but it's going to be an interesting challenge.
People don't realize the great shape that we're actually in. There's 6 billion gallons sitting in a reservoir that's topped off. There's another 6 billion gallons sitting in the aquifer storage and recovery, the ASR wells. We only use, the 4 counties only use about 70% of the available supply. We're not using everything that we have. People read in the paper about the droughts out west, the water shortages out west, and then this new dynamic of the terrible problem in Flint, Michigan. We have none of that. Everybody, it's been taken care of methodically over all these years, so people need to know that.
When you look at where the authority is now, and as I mentioned before, having a drought-proof source of water that is alternative in nature, that still protects the environment, still protects the river, still protects Charlotte Harbor, and created a mitigation on the spot where this big reservoir is without having to buy one mitigation credit and to continually have the authority manage that, how is that not a win?
the value of water for business development, hospitals, schools, that without water, you will not have a community. So it's critical that the 4 counties work together in cooperation through the authority, create a reliable water supply, not only now, but well into the future. And that's exactly what they've done.
What the authority is doing, the people involved, are creating a viable water supply, a quality water supply that will be there for generations, for our kids' kids, and their kids. It's a great foundation to build this regional system on. I think it's doing exactly what the visionaries had in mind for the 4-county area.
Well, I tell you, when I drive out here, look at the reservoir, and think about the number of years, the number of people that it took to do it, that really makes you feel good that, yes, we were able to accomplish it. It was good for everybody, and everybody wins with it.